Hey, this is Meredith Elliott Powell, and you know what time it is. It is time for Thrive, the show where we dive into the strategies, discuss the steps, everything that you need to know to make all of this uncertainty start working for you. So I got a really interesting guest for us today. It is Irvine Nugent. He is are you a partner, CEO of Copia's? Kind of tell us a little bit.
I am partner of Copia Leadership. We're a group of three partners, focus primarily on leadership development and with a focus on emotional intelligence and emotionally intelligent conversations.
All right. So I really want to discuss emotional intelligence today. Group, stay with us because we're gonna dive in and we're gonna discuss how learning to identify, control your own emotions, especially in a time when, gosh, I feel like emotions are raw. Today, people are feeling so much stress, but how you really not only to increase your own leadership effectiveness, but to increase your own success, happiness, and decrease your stress overall. So I always like to start out, rather than having me introduce you, give us a little bit of background about you, what you do, how you came to do it, and why you're so passionate about leadership and emotional intelligence.
So my name is Irvine Nugent. I'm based just outside of Washington, D.C. My primary focus is on leadership, as you say, but especially on emotional intelligence, helping leaders really navigate the business environment we're in so that they can expand their emotional intelligence. Why is that important? Because at the heart, I really believe at the heart of leadership are emotionally intelligent conversations. And when we get those wrong, it impacts outcomes and impacts our connections with others. So how do you get into this? I grew up in Northern Ireland. I am classically known as a child of the Troubles. I grew up with all this conflict that you may be aware of around me. And, I often thinking growing up in a society that was so divisive with people attacking one another, it placed in my heart this desire, I think in this dream that there has to be a better way. There just has to be a better way of people communicating with each other, of dealing with difference, of dealing with conflict. And, when you look at organizations, it's exactly that way as well. So I really have a vision of helping leaders and organizations create spaces that are more human. And part of what I did was grow up in a pub, and my book was called Leadership Lessons from the Pub. And you say, well, why is that? And I said, this pub in Ireland is this unique place where people come together, where everyone's invited into the circle, where we honors each other's stories, where people can laugh in their differences. And I said, we need more of that in the workplace.
Yeah, one of the things that I bartended for years, and one of the things I really noticed about pubs, and I had this realization probably when I was about 23 years old, is that they're some of the most accepting places where people really build family.
Yes,
And they help and they support each other with no judgment at all.
absolutely.
I mean, you have the person who honestly, is probably there too often, drinks too much, can't organize their finances, are always in trouble, but people just help them. I mean, that's what they do. The thing that I really want to dive in today is this idea that you talk about of going inward.
Yeah.
And that the first place, if you want to lead others, that I'm assuming what you mean by that is you need to begin to work on yourself. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, what I say is, before you can lead others, you have to lead yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that as I work with many, many clients, I find that there is a correlation between leadership success and self-awareness. I find the stronger the self-awareness, the more work a leader has put into understanding themselves, to understanding how they react, to be able to have the skills to really choose reactions, then the better leadership outcomes they have. And I think very often we don't put enough work into that critical self-awareness, self-management. And by that, I mean, understanding, do I have a good emotional literacy? Do I understand the emotions that are coming up? Do I know how to manage them as they come up? And do I have skills that really help me choose in the moment thoughtful responses that really will help me arrive at the goal that I want to achieve?
Why do we lack self-awareness at the level that we lack self-awareness?
Well, it's interesting. No one ever teaches us about emotions in school.
Mhm.
We grow up really depending on the background that we have grown up in. And we know that that is so varied. Some families are really great at
Yeah.
emotional expressions, others are not. And so we're left to fend for ourselves. And the great thing about this, of course, is you can grow at any stage of your
Yeah.
life, which is wonderful. But I think that's part of it. Part of it is no one. And then, you get into a role. And I think at times it can be uncomfortable for people saying, I just don't get this. And I think, at times in business life, we don't talk about our emotions. We get this fallacy in our head that, well, everything has to be logical and we have to follow this, and that's fine. But that's not how we're made up as human beings. Our emotions are intrinsically linked into everything that we do each and every day.
You grew up in Northern Ireland. Are
Mm.
you Irish Catholic or Irish Protestant? Are you
I'm
one?
Irish Catholic. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Me too.
Right.
And I think about, we were very much raised to deny any emotion, that, that we had. And so I agree with you. We're not only taught not about our emotions, but then to manage,
Yeah.
our emotions, or to really realize, and I think this is so important, as leaders, to realize that people need very different types of leadership. I was raised in a world where we were told that employees should adapt to us.
Yeah.
And the truth is, a leader really needs to be able to, if you want to influence people, be able to connect, really, connect with them.
Yeah. Yeah. And Meredith, one of the things that I always find as well is growing up, we always are told this fallacy that there are good emotions and bad emotions.
Yeah.
And the thing about anger and sadness sometimes, or fear, is considered bad. And I always say, the best definition I have of emotion, emotion is a conveyor of information that is important for you to look at because it's important for your welfare. And I think if we look at emotions as, what's the message? Why am I angry in this moment? And what's the message of that emotion for me? And at times we don't take the time to do that. And the other thing you said is totally true as well, that I think, and especially in different generations, are looking for an emotional connection. They're looking for an empathetic person who's able to listen and for people to feel that they've been listened to.
Yeah. Yeah. And do you feel that that's even more important in today's environment? I hesitate. I'm such a student of history that I can't really say that we're going through more troubled times than we've ever been. I just finished reading all about the Irish potato famine, and I mean, good Lord. I mean, what people went through is just unimaginable. But I don't know. I don't. It feels like, I almost feel like in history, people expected some level of suffering and we don't expect it now. And so it's almost become more stressful. But I feel like a leader today, people come through the door and before they ever showed up, and you add the stress of the work environment, they came in with a big monkey on their back.
Absolutely. And then you add to that, I think what is unique about this age is the environment, the business environment of constant change, that
Yeah.
nothing is static. I mean, at least years ago, people grew up and there wasn't that much change.
Yeah.
Now
That's
it's
true.
constant change. And the thing about it is, as human beings, we're not made for constant change. We have to adapt to that. And it's uncomfortable because everything about us loves certainty.
Yeah.
And when you add that in, it actually, I always say, I don't think we appreciate the toll it takes on us and the
Mhm.
toll it takes on our emotions. And so I think we just have to be aware of that, and the skills needed to be more resilient.
So here I am, and I'm bought into this. I'm like, I want to be a better leader, and I think whether you run a small operation, you run a large team. I mean, leadership is really everything. Or whether you're a parent at home, or you just want to be a better part of your community. I mean, good Lord knows we need leaders right now more than we've probably ever needed leaders. Where do I begin? What is the journey of managing my emotions? What does that mean?
So it's a great question. There are two kind of lenses to look. One is the inner lens. So I think part of that is, how well do I know myself when I show up in the moment? Do I have a
Yeah.
command? So sometimes you say, "Oh, how are you feeling?" Angry. Well, what do you mean by that? And people don't have words. And so therefore it's really increasing the literacy around and understanding patterns. Emotions normally show up in patterns. So if you're having unsuccessful conversations, or something's happening in the workplace, it's a chance to stand back and to really look at that and say, what's happening here? Do I understand that? And then the other lens is, how well am I in reading other people? Do I have a good sense of connecting with them? Or do I get do I scratch my head at times and say, where are they coming from? I don't understand this. What do they want? So I think both of those are really critically important because they interplay with each other in any workplace conversation we have.
I always tell people that I think the most effective communicator in the world is this GPS system on your phone. And the reason I say that is because when you miss a turn,
Mhm.
she doesn't call you an idiot. She
Mm,
doesn't scream at you. She doesn't get mad. She recalculates. She
yeah,
assumed that she didn't communicate in a way that you could understand. And I think if we could all begin to make that shift,
yeah,
it could be, it could be really, really effective in assuming that it's your fault because the power lies in you. I think emotional intelligence is so important because the power lies not in me being right. The power lies in you understanding what I said so that you would take action.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And to understand in the moment, to be really reflective about what questions am I asking here?
Hmm.
Am I
Hmm.
asking an empathetic question? Am I really encouraging curiosity here and an
Yeah.
understanding? Or am I being more directive? Now, that doesn't mean that you always have to have the empathetic question because there are crises when we have to take charge. But I think, so much about emotional intelligence is really this connection that we have because we know the better the connection, we know that's what's going to happen is a richer conversation. You're going to get more information, which with more data, you can make better decisions. And so it's really all really tied and interconnected together.
So, I heard a stat on the news the other day that 1 in 4 employees today is struggling with a mental health crisis. Now, I'm not exactly sure what a mental health crisis means, or the level, but I found it a pretty startling, a statistic. So, when you talk about connection, emotional intelligence, if I can connect with you, you trust me, or those types of things. What are we lacking more connection today than we have in history? And what is the value of connection in the workplace?
Yeah, so it's a really interesting stat. One of the ones, one of the alarming ones. So it's kind of like, how do you unpack that mental? What's going on here? And I
Yeah.
think is anxiety. I think there is growing anxiety, and part of that is there's a number of factors going in there. But another stat that's really for me a revelatory is loneliness. Loneliness,
Mm,
the
yeah.
amount of data coming out of people feeling isolated. Now, part of that, of course, is Zoom culture and working remotely, and that creates. But it's deeper than that. This was trends that were even pre-COVID, and I think that lies into this lack of connection. So now that's a big question. I think part of it is the skill set to make connections maybe is not there. I think we've got a whole new generation coming into the workplace where perhaps those skills are not quite as sharp
Yeah.
as they used to be. So how do we give people those skills? Because I still believe at the core of the human experience is this longing to make connection. I
Yeah.
think live in communities where a sense of community is not there anymore, where people move so much, and so I think this is a bigger issue. But I think we're feeling it in the workplace, and I think the beginning of connection is really these simple skills. They're not so simple but really it's about listening, it's about good questions, and it's about attempt and curiosity, a mind of curiosity. Am I curious about this person's experience? And is this person not just another person that's going to achieve something for me? And I think if you come with a spirit of curiosity, listening, and good questions, I think that's half the battle to connection.
What I find so interesting about everything that you said is you are telling me that I will find connection by outwardly focusing on other people. And here's where I'm going with this is that somehow I feel like in our society, things got twisted around. Like the purpose of Facebook or the purpose of LinkedIn or is to brag about what I am doing so that you see the fascinating things in my life. And there's value in that. I mean, I've got to create a brand about myself from a business perspective. But I'm just sitting here weighing in my head, like growing up, my mother, had a lot of very funny rules for her children. One of which was we had to write thank you notes. In fact, we weren't even allowed to play with our Christmas presents until we wrote a thank you note to everybody. I'm sure that would be child abuse now. But so I will write a thank you note. It's almost like it's ingrained in me. It's like brushing my teeth. I write a note so quickly. So a young gentleman that we know passed away from a brain tumor, and a gentleman in our neighborhood was very good friends with him. So you do what you do for the family. But I got up the other morning and I just wrote a quick note, and because I thought, he's lost a good friend. I'm going to write a note to him saying, how difficult that must be. I remember this about you and everything. I got the sweetest text from him back saying how much that meant to him, that I took the time to do that. Now, what I want everybody to see is I got way more like that text. Like, wow. I was like, what? I mean, that took me seconds. It was no big deal. It was a thought, but how connected now I feel more to my neighbor than having them even over to dinner or it's just a different level that I feel like you get more back from being outwardly focused. And I'll use your term, curious to other people. Then what is society is teaching us now is for me to brag about myself, which again has value in it. So I just kind of wanted your thoughts on that as it relates to
yes. So I agree with you so much. These, I like to call them thresholds. I think there are opportunities every day, little doorways we can walk through. And they are invitations at the grocery store. They're simple. They're not profound. To make a connection. We've become a little isolated, and when we're standing in the grocery store, there's a little opportunity there just to say something. And who knows where a person is in their journey that day. And it's kind of taking the risk, because I think we've become a little afraid of taking a risk, and being curious and just asking about the other person. The other thing as well is, I think we're in a crisis in society where we don't have these gathering spaces. We started with the pub. The pub is a place to gather. Institutional, religion is, we know that the figures are declining now, not saying good or bad about religion, but it's a place for connection. We had all these different social clubs. They were places, and you see these communities now at the moment, they're struggling because people are moving in and out so quickly. So I think there is a crisis in that even those places for connection are going away. And so I think we have to relearn and recommit to that.
Yeah. And I think that, I do think it is a skill set that is being lost in the younger generation, because there isn't as much, opportunity. And I think that connection and the ability to build and foster relationships, is the key to success. I mean, it is a skill that if you put the time and energy into, you will get strong return on investment from it. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know about you, but when I grew up, my mother would kick me out of the house and say, "Go play today." Yeah,
all day long.
Find your own fun. Whereas now, we're stuck to an iPad, etc. And I think we are. I mean, is it wrong or right? I don't know, but I know that there's a skill set missing there that I had that others don't.
Yeah, it's my mother too, when I was a kid, she told us that when we walked into a room, if somebody didn't have somebody to talk to, it was our responsibility to talk to them. I hated her for that as a child. You go to the pool, you're like 7 years old, you just want to play with your friends. And she would say, "No, you can't do that. That little girl doesn't have a friend. Go talk to her." But it turned out to be one of the greatest skills, that I've ever had. Well, it's hard to believe we're coming to the end of this podcast. I want to ask you like 3 more questions. One is going to be super easy, and that is how people find you, find out about you, learn more about emotional intelligence. I want to know your 2 favorite leadership lessons from the pub. And you ask that one, then I'll ask another one. Answer that one.
So people can contact me by Irvine at irvinenugent.com, LinkedIn, or the company website, which is copialeadership.com. 2 lessons from the pub. Number one is we have the power to set the tone. We are way more powerful than I think we are. And because of the way we're made up, I think we can influence the emotions of others and never forget that. Yeah. And then the second lesson I have is that we have a story to tell. And when we
Mhm.
tell our story, we make connection. And when we invite other people to tell their story, it creates connection.
Oh, so true. I mean, so often, people look at you and they think you just have it all together and, you couldn't understand where, you know, people came from or what they've been through. And the truth is, I mean, it's everybody's got a story. Everybody's got, some challenge. And when we can connect through that, it's really, really powerful. So my last question is, here we are looking at 2024. And what I have figured out from listening to economists is nobody has a clue what this year is going to bring. I mean, I just wrote a blog talking about the fact that you've got, I think, 70 elections in countries all over the world, too many geopolitical tensions, and then who knows what's happening with interest rates. It's going to be definitely uncertainty. What, from your perspective, in your area of expertise, of leadership, of emotional intelligence, of connection, what's your greatest piece of advice for anyone out there wanting to make 2024 a great year?
Here's one advice I'll give. I think in times like these, we so easily begin to focus on things we cannot change. I
Mhm.
cannot change the economy. I can't change if there's going to be a war or how long the Ukraine war or the Middle East conflicts are going to. What I can change is directly what is within my control, what is within my influence. And so I think in 2024, at times when we feel a little overwhelmed, if we can just regroup and say, what today is within my control? What can I influence? Because I think that's where the secret sauce lies and how we can really, really manage the reality that we're in.
So well said. Focus. I think one of the most amazing things that I've learned from doing research on successful people is that success isn't logical,
Yeah.
right? I mean, it doesn't belong to the person with the best parents, the most lucky breaks or anything like that. It truly comes down to your ability to focus. Well, you have been amazing today. We've just scratched the surface of all that we want to talk to. I ordered leadership lessons from the pub. I find that fascinating. So look for it to be featured on my other podcast, Sales Logic. But I so appreciate your time today. Really appreciate the conversation. And we'd love to have you back as a guest to talk even further, especially after I finish the book. I'm going to have a lot more questions. You up for that?
I am absolutely. Thank you, Meredith. Appreciate the opportunity.
All right. Well, welcome. Thank you to the audience as well. We'll see you right back here next week for another episode of Thrive. Look for this to come out on our podcast channel. You'll get the notes there, all the information that you want to find out about today's guest. And we'll see you right back here next week for another episode of Thrive. And remember, together, we are going to turn all of this uncertainty into your greatest competitive advantage.